Thank you, Joe. Okay, so, we hear a lot in the news about the axis of evil. So this is about the axis of freedom. The Chametz-Matzah-Freedom axis, A-X-I-S, in other words, of Pesach. So the first of the sources that we have is from Rav Dessler, the Michtav Me Eliyahu, Rav Eliyahu Dessler, and his classic 5-volume set that he has on Jewish thought and understanding is titled Michtav, letter or letters, Me Eliyahu, from Eliyahu. And he writes, as we mentioned a number of times, Zman Cheirutenu hu hashpa miyuchedet shel cheirut. This time of our freedom, right? When Pesach arrives in our Shmona Esrei, in our Yalav Yavo, we refer to it as Zman Cheirutenu, the time of our freedom, which means that every year at this time there is a hashpa'ah miyuchedet. There is a very, very unique, special opportunity of this influence, this spiritual opportunity of Cheirut Hanitenet L'Kol Nefesh Mi Yisroel, that is given, availed to every Jewish soul, every Jewish person, Bizman Hahu. Every year at the time of Pesach, we re-enter this opportunity. This opportunity avails itself to us. Hazman hazeh eino tarich histori greda lachubo chagigat simcha she'avra. As Rav Dessler always points out about the Jewish calendar, that it's not starting at one point and going straight out in time, but rather we are going in cycles, not going in circles. That is a negative connotation. We are going in cycles. And this time is not, this date is not a historical, tarikh histori. It's not a historical date that we remember what happened, we celebrate, we commemorate that which happened in the time past. But this is a time every year where we have this opportunity, lilchom, to battle, to fight, laman cheirut nafshenu, for the freedom of our nefesh, of our souls. Okay, so how do we fight for the freedom of our soul? How would we define freedom?
We have a choice either to believe in Hashem and follow His way, or if we're slaves, then we're compelled to.
Okay, so without getting into God yet, how do we define freedom? How do we define a free person?
Will.
Well, a slave might have will.
Having control over oneself.
Good, but will not have the ability to necessarily act on those free-willed, moral, or other types of choices. Freedom is one who has the ability to make and act upon their choices.
In other languages, freedom has the word live, like liberté. Living.
Interesting.
Life, it has something to do with
Liberty.
life.
Right.
So one has, conducts one's life in a way that it's unencumbered.
Good.
By someone else's.
By others' coercion.
Yeah.
Good. Now, we view ourselves as being a combination of a Yetzer Tov and a Yetzer Ra, which means that we have pulls, drives, inclinations that pull us in a positive direction and those which pull us in a negative direction. So from a Jewish point of view, this freedom would be the ability to overcome, there's what I know I should do, and there's what I want to do. But often what I want to do goes against what I know I really should be doing. I want to stay in bed when my alarm goes off in the morning very often. I know I should be getting up to start my day and come to minyan and to take it from there. So there's also a certain degree of freedom that I have control over myself, right? Not just from outside coercion, but I have a certain degree of control over myself that I'm free from the different drives and pulls that I recognize as not being the best things for myself. So freedom is giving me the ability to choose and not be coerced both from external coercion and also from a certain degree of internal coercion. So we're going to go see sources now of three aspects of the Yetzer Hara. And we speak about freedom, we're talking about being able to be in control of ourselves. One aspect of this Yetzer Hara is to do things that we know are not right, though they might give us some immediate gratification, short-term pleasure, but we recognize that that's not what we should be doing. Another aspect of it is egocentricity, right? That it's all about me, and everyone must be bowing and recognizing just how amazing I am and everything that I do is, right? This egocentricity and self-aggrandizement. And thirdly, there is a form of idolatry that we must contend with, which applies very much today. When we think idolatry, we're thinking of what might go on today in India and what we read about amongst the prophets, and we say, that doesn't really do much for me. But there are aspects that do apply to us. So let's go through these different sources, which will deal with these three different aspects of the Yetzer Hara. And again, freedom has got to be the ability for me to act without coercion, whether it is external or internal. Number 2, the Gemara, Talmud Bavli, Brachos, Yud Zayin Amud Aleph. The Gemara there says, Rabbi Alexandri, Batar Dematzli, after he would daven, Amar Hachi, he would say the following. Right, the Gemara goes through lots of different supplications that were added on by different individuals, different sages after their davening. We're very familiar with one of them, which is Elokai Nitzor Lishoni Meira Usfatami Daver Mirma, which we almost view that as part of our Amida. Yet that is a supplication from the Gemara that was added in after our Amidah on a daily basis. Another one of them is what's added on Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur, right? Before I was created, Eini Kedai v'Achshash Nasarti. Right now that I've been created, also Eini Kedai. It's also from the Gemara there. The Yehi Ratzon that we say after the Birchat HaShachar. Right? Save me from any bad encounters, bad individuals. That's also listed over there. So a lot of what is part of our day-to-day or year-to-year tefillah are taken from these different Yehi Ratzons. He would say, Ribon Olamim, Galui v'yadu lefanecha, it is revealed and known before you. Sheritzonenu la'asot ritzoncha. Our innermost desire is to do, our innermost will is to fulfill ritzoncha, your will. Umi ma'akev, and what holds us back? Oh, su'or shebe'isa, the yeast in the dough. That's what's holding us back. Is this the first gluten-free diet being advocated for? So Rashi says, no, that's not the issue. Rashi explains on the bottom there, su'or shebe'isa, yetzer hara shebelevavenu. Hamachamitzenu. Fascinating. The Yetzer Hara that's in our hearts, that turns us into, that chametz is us. So So right now we see, this Yetzer Hara is compared to Chametz. And therefore, if we're talking about freedom from coercion, whether it's external or internal coercion, then the code word, or better yet, that which manifests that in our physical world, is this Se'or Shebe'isa HaMachamitzenu, which prevents us, the drive, right? The English doesn't say anything over here. Hamachamitzenu, which makes us like chametz. What does that mean? We'll see as we go along. The Shibud Malchiot, and also the Shibud Malchiot are being under the control of different forces, different governments. So there's the internal coercion, represented by Se'or Shebe'isa, and there's the external coercion, represented by the kingdoms that rule over us. Yehi ratzon milfanecha, let it be the will before you, God. Shetatzilenu miyadam, save us from their hands. V'nashuv la'asot chukei b'tzoncha b'leivav shalem, and let us return to do the ordinances, the laws of your will. B'leivav shalem, it says with a perfect heart. I would say with a complete heart, not in our often half-hearted manner. If I ask someone to daven and they say, all right, I say, you know what? Better yet, I'll do it. It's an opportunity. It's a zechut. It's a merit. If it's all right, then we'll find, right? I'd rather have someone who says yes. Now, of course, granted, we're supposed to be a little bit hesitant when we're asked not to show I'm the most worthy. But I think our issue is not somebody. We need to have that excitement and that recognition of the opportunity. There has to be b'leivav shalem. So we know chametz happens when the dough has enough time to rise, and there is inactivity. That's why they keep working. They keep working that flour water mixture, and that symbolizes laziness, right? The Yetzer Hara thrives on the path of least resistance. Chametz is the opposite of the matzah, is the opposite of the chametz, and that takes alacrity, that takes enthusiasm, that takes speed, right? The 18 minutes, right? You have to keep moving on it. And we pointed out many times the difference between the letters of chametz and matzah. They both have a mem, they both have a tzadi. Chet and hey is just a little line that makes the difference, that crosses over, and that hey becomes a chet, and that matzah turns into chametz.
Rabbi?
Yes.
The holiest day we have is Shabbat. And for Shabbat, what do? We take yeast and we build challah, right? Which is a bountiful and full of itself. So isn't there
There needs to be the balance. You're right. We don't have matzah all year round, right? You're right. And there needs to be this beautification of Shabbat and of the role that we play in it. But at the start of our becoming a nation, the Zman Cherutenu, right? But we can't be enslaved to that, right? A person needs to be able to enjoy that of life and not be enslaved to that, right? It's a matter of being in control, and that's why Pesach time, when we are becoming a nation, at the start of a nation, we need to understand that as a nation, we do not have those negative aspects of the chametz. Okay? The Sefer Achinuch, we mentioned a number of times, he goes through the 613 mitzvot of the Torah, gives background and gives explanations. And he writes there, Va'al kein b'harchik ha-chametz, therefore by distancing ourselves from this chametz, Shunase b'shehiyah gedol, which comes about as a result of this waiting, this tarrying, mi korvenu yikach dimyon. We need to take an understanding a parable, liknot midat hazrizut, to acquire the midah of zrizut, alacrity, kalut, lightness, mihirat, speed, b'maseh Hashem baruch hu, when it comes to the acts of the mitzvah, the acts of Hashem, blessed He. As our sages have said, Havi kal kanesh, be light as an eagle, ratz katzvi, run like a deer, gibor kari, and strong like a lion, la sot ritzon avicha sheba shamayim, to do the will of your Father in heaven. That is what this matzah, as opposed to the chametz, represents. In the Pelu Yoetz, which is source number 4, mitzvah biur chametz hi leva'eret ruach hatuma v'yetzer hara mikirbeinu. It's not just to get it out of the house. It's to get it out from ourselves. Ignore my turn. We're still number 4 on the first page here, on the first side, right? Which is to remove this impurity, these unhealthy pulls, mikir beinu, from our midst, from ourselves, from our hearts. The more one involves themselves in the search, in the check, and when we're doing that search and that check, we should be thinking to ourselves, it's not just to find the pretzels under the couch, right? But it's also to find that which is the laziness and the antagonism and the negativism that we often find in ourselves that slows us down and doesn't allow us to move forward.
I thought it was to get the prize.
Huh? The Sefer HaChinuch in source number 5 also speaks about... Yes, Steve?
How do you say meshubach? That's a familiar term.
Yes, he played a...
More,
right? There was a little play on words over there. We say in the Seder, Kol hamarve l'sapi b'tziyah Mitzrayim, all those who speak much about Yitzi Mitzrayim, harezeh meshubach. So here he says, the more you get rid of that bedika, and again, not just doing the external house cleaning, but also the internal scrutiny, he plays on the words that correct Steve, harezeh meshubach. And the Sefer HaChinuch also explains, Sha'asor, in source number 5, Magbia atzmo, right? The yeast causes itself to get all filled up. But there's no real substance there.
And there's a lot of air.
A lot of hot air.
A lot of air.
Right? We have that expression also.
Right.
This person's full of hot air. That's what the chametz is. It's a swelling without there being anything substantive there. Right? How Hashem despises an arrogant heart. Right? Very often, when we say "Ve'ahavta l'reacha kamocha," love your neighbor as yourself, love your friend as yourself. Very often, when we look at others, we look at them with a very critical eye. We see what's wrong. We look at ourselves and we say, "Oh, I'm a pretty good guy. I do some things that aren't so good. For the most part, I'm a good guy." Yet, when you look at others, we often tend to focus on their negative aspects. Right? Ve'ahavta l'reacha kamocha. The same way that when you view yourself, you've got a pretty generous eye. Ve'ahavta l'reacha. That's how you should view someone else. So, Rabbi Pesach Kron tells a classic story that in the Yerushalmi community, right, they used to throw kernels and nuts at the groom on the Shabbat morning of his ofruf, right? And this was meant to be as a symbol of the blessings. Right? We throw candies at the B'nai Mitzvah, right? They used to throw kernels of wheat kernels and nuts at his afruf. Now in Yerushalayim, right, amongst the Hasidim in Yerushalayim, they have Yerushalmis, whether or not you're Hasidic, have a custom to wear the shtreimel. The shtreimel is a wide fur hat, right? And a groom wears it for the first time on the Shabbat of his afruf, and then throughout the Sheva Brachas, he wears that. So, a young Yerushalmi groom was enjoying a Sheva Bracha meal at the home of his new in-laws on Pesach Chol Hamoed. Everything was going well until he looked down to his soup before eating. he noticed floating in the middle of the bowl a soup-soaked wheat kernel. Now, I had relatives in Meir Sha'arim, and I used to go there for Pesach. And they were on high alert on gebracht. Gebracht is not allowing any of the matzah to become wet, and there they would completely, clear off the entire table before any liquids would even come out. And here's this Hasidic guy and sees in his soup is a wheat kernel, right? Chametz on Pesach being served in the home of his in-laws, and he felt very uncomfortable, quietly got rid of the wheat kernel, and would not eat anything for the rest of the meal. The next morning of Shmuel Salant, of blessed memory, the chief Rav of Yerushalayim, he lived 1838 to 1909. He saw the groom was very troubled. He asked him, what's wrong? And the chatan explained what happened. And he said, I made a terrible mistake marrying into such a family. Such a family where there's chametz on Pesach. This is what I married into. Rav Salan carefully removed his shtreimel. And as he turned it upside down, they both watched as he shook it a little bit, and all these wheat kernels from his afruf fell out of his shtreimel and onto the floor. Right? The groom realized, right, the kernels had gotten there on the Shabbat before the wedding. Right? And the message is, before looking at someone else's shtreimel, look at your own. Right? Before seeing where someone else might have gone wrong, look at yourself and see where you might have gone wrong. Right? So the chametz, the matzah, is this, right? Well, it couldn't have been me, and therefore, who else is at fault? Remember one of my kids, he would love to spin around. He got crazy dizzy. He'd fall down. He'd say, you did it. I said, well, actually, no, you did it to yourself. It wasn't anyone else who did it. Right? No, you did it. Right? Our first inclination is, who did this to me? Who's at fault? And that's part of this chametz, this yetzer hara of, well, it couldn't have been, the royal eye, right? So we automatically assume it's coming from somewhere else. So we have this idea of the chametz and the yetzer hara representing ra, acts that we shouldn't do. We have it representing this haughtiness, this gava, this egocentricity, and also idolatry in all of its forms. Let's see source number 6, Rav Becher. Again, his Gateway to Judaism, I mentioned this before, that this is a book that all the converts or those who are in a conversion program need to read. If everybody would read it, if we'd all read as much as the converts need to read, we'd all be in very, very good shape. He writes, the essence of idolatry is that it takes something insignificant with no independent existence and inflates its importance out of all proportion to its true value. Whether a person looks at a force of nature or a piece of wood and calls it a god, or considers himself the ultimate reality independent of God, it is all idolatry. This idea is represented by chametz, which is basically inflated matzah. So giving something importance beyond what it really has, what its true value is. Right? So we get very active in searching the house and cleaning the house for chametz and searching for the kosher Pesach products. I was in Costco yesterday with Natalie, and we had the Rav Eidelitz book, and we had the OU book, right? And the OU book says that nuts with an OU from Kirkland are okay as long as they're raw. But all of a sudden I saw something new this year. And it was raw nuts that were steam pasteurized. So what does that do? Right? So I called the OU this morning, and they said, no, steam pasteurized is okay. And I passed that on to Rav Eidelitz, and he thanked me, and I said, it's good to help you one time for the hundreds of times that you helped me, right? But with all of our focus on all of the external, it's a tragedy if that's what it's all about, and we're not focusing on ourselves, right? And the spiritual freedom from the influence of the Yetzer Hara is meant to be a first step, as Rav Hirsch writes very, very beautifully. Freedom, number 7, by which we mean deliverance from burdens, and the breaking of chains is only a negative good, right? Meaning that's the removal of impediments. This freedom is merely a state in which the impediment standing in the way of fulfillment of the human vocation has been removed. It is merely a state in which room has been made. The opportunity has been presented, has been enabled for the divine likeness to shine forth in man. If this vocation is to be fulfilled, if this likeness is to be realized, and the person who has become liberated and has been freed from his burdens must acknowledge him to whom he owed this liberation from his burdens and this freedom. The freed, unburdened person must accept his freedom from burdens and his liberty as a gift from God. He must recognize in God the source of his freedom. He must feel eternally bound to God and in service to him precisely because of his freedom. So what does that mean? Right? How is God the source of our freedom? Right here in the United States, we're all living freely. What do we mean that God is the source of our uniquely Jewish freedom? So Pirkei Avot, in source number 8. Amr Shimon Levi. V'omer, it says, V'haluchot masei elokim heima. The luchot, the tablets, were the masei elokim, were the act made by God. Right? In today's jargon, we would say that Moshe downloaded the tablets from the cloud. Okay, sorry. Okay. V'amichtav, michtav elokim. And the writing was the writing of God. Charut, engraved. Al haluchot, onto the luchot. Al tikrei charut. Don't read it as being charut. Don't read it as being engraved. Ella cheirut, freedom. She'ein lecha ben chorin elami she'osek b'talmud Torah. The only truly free person is a person who is osek, who's involved in Torah. What does that mean? So once again, Rav Chaim Friedlander in his Sifsei Chaim says, Elu hachashim atzmam chofshiyim min ha-mitzvot, einam chofshiyim klal. Those people who regard themselves as free from mitzvot are not really free at all. Adrabah, hem kavulim chazak ma'od, kol echa mehem hu eved nirtza letavotav. They are bound like an eved nirtza. Who is the eved nirtza? The slave who says after 6 years, what does he say?
I want to stay.
I want to stay on. And what do? We bore a hole. We pierce a hole into his ear. He's the eved nirtza letavotav, to his pulls, to his desires. It's interesting. On the high holidays of Shana Yom Kippur, we have a whole beautiful, beautiful piyut that we sing about Melech Elyon, Melech Elyon, Melech Elyon. And the ark is open. The king that is so ascended, right, who is so above, so above. And then we close the ark for a couple of paragraphs where we speak about the Melech Evyon, the impoverished king, referring to the Yetzer Hara. And then we open it up, Aval Melech Elyon, but the lofty king. So they ask, why do we refer to this Yetzer Hara as a Melech Evyon?
It rules us.
Because a person thinks, if I will reject this Melech Elyon, then I'm free. I can do whatever I want. And the answer is, everybody has their melech. Everybody has their ruler. Everybody is pulled. Decide if you want to have a melech elyon or if you want to have a melech evyon. Hatori hi v'raki notenet et ha'cherut v'memshala ala ta'avot. The Torah, that's what gives a person control over one's desires. Al tikrei charut. Therefore, the sages say, don't read the verse as being charut, engraved on the luchot, ella, rather, it should be read as cherut, freedom. Hamatzliach l'hishtachrer mitavotav, one who's successful in freeing himself from that Yetzer Hara and rules over it. Hu HaMelech Amiti, that's a person who's truly, truly in control. We say in Pirkei Avot, Ezehu Gibor, who is a powerful person? What's the answer? Hakovesh et Yitzro, right? Tov, a patient person, I forget the exact word, miloked ear. Greater is a person of patience than one who can conquer a whole city. Be in control of ourselves. The Torah is what teaches us to be in control of ourselves. I just want to end off with a beautiful story. In the days before Glasnost, a person visited the USSR, right? This is when the Soviet Union was still, before Gorbachev started to deconstruct it, basically. I remember probably the best political cartoon that I ever saw was a picture of Gorbachev and his big globe, right? This big ball that said on it, the USSR, right? And he had a little hammer that said reforms, and he gave a little tap, and the whole thing cracked straight through it, right? Before Glasnost, though, it was going there was dangerous. Being Jewish there, acting as a Jew there was dangerous. It was quite a different world. So we're there to meet Soviet Jews and help advance their Jewish study and observance. We also knew the need for extreme caution. We had been warned and had not been exaggerated. Arriving at the prearranged apartment building, we knocked on the door very softly and only once, so as not to attract the neighbors' attention. It was quickly opened. We were hastily ushered inside. To our delight, almost 30 people had gathered for the meeting, where only 5 or 6 had been expected. One young man in particular, Sasha, seemed to stand out from the rest. His sensitive countenance and soft-spoken manner signified a highly refined human being. After all the introduction was made, the learning session began. True, there were only 2 chumashim for 30 students, but there was such electrified enthusiasm and zealousness in the learning that it seemed to link every mind and soul into one body. The back and forth. Questions, answers, comments, remarks flew. Unfortunately, so did the time. It was truly a merit to be teaching them. Their attention to every syllable we uttered and their resoluteness to comprehend every nuance of every letter was inspiring. I was not sure at that point who was gleaning more from our lesson, the students or the teachers. When we finished, one of the participants, a doctor from Vilna, went over to the piano that was standing in a corner of the living room and begged us to teach him a Jewish melody. We sang a few notes, and in a minute, everyone in the room was on their feet, singing and dancing to the music. As my companion and I stood up, Sasha also stood up and said, "Before you go, I'd like to say that I cannot thank you enough for what you have given us tonight. Allow me to express a small measure of gratitude by inviting you to a farewell meal at my home tomorrow at noon." We were touched and we accepted his invitation. The next day I decided to bring along a gift as a token of our appreciation for the farewell meal and an acknowledgement of our respect and affection. I brought a challah cover. It was made of white terylene, had a light blue Star of David embroidered on it, and across the front in blue with the Hebrew word Shabbat Shalom. For some reason I thought this was a perfect gift for Sasha. Arriving at his apartment at exactly noon, we were astounded to see that not only were most of the participants of the previous night's lecture present, but at least an additional dozen new people. Everyone seemed happy to see us and greeted us warmly. In the center, in its place of prominence, was one single matzah, which had probably been carefully preserved for a special occasion since the last Pesach. a crystal wine bottle with about 2 inches of wine, and a sticker pasted on it that read in Hebrew, Yayin me Yerushalayim, wine from Jerusalem. There were some vegetables, cut up fruits, little squares of cake. Please sit, have something. When Sasha got to serve the next course, I followed him into the kitchen. I wanted to present his gift to him in private. Sasha, it's a gift for you. He looked very surprised and flustered, hesitantly taking the bag. I watched as he opened it, took out the challah cover, and unfolded it slowly. After taking one look at it, Sasha burst into tears. I felt bewildered and just stood there just for a moment, not knowing what to say or how to react. After a few seconds, he composed himself and wordlessly led me out of the kitchen, down the hall, into a small vestibule where there stood a tall bookcase with some old, crumbling Torah books on the top shelf. He climbed up a stepladder and took out something very carefully from between 2 tall volumes. You don't know how long I've hoped for this, he said to me. He bent over and handed me what he had just taken out. It was a thin, white, folded paper napkin. I slowly opened it up and looked at it. There on the front was drawn in blue marker a Star of David. And across the top, in the same blue ink, was written in Hebrew, Shabbat Shalom. He took the challah cover I had given him, folded it up, and placed it between the 2 books. He climbed down the stepladder, pointing to the napkin I was holding in my hand, said softly to me, "This one is for you."
Oh, how nice.
We are part of something. And this has gone back thousands of years to the Exodus, when we recognized who we were, the role we needed to play, who we were and who we weren't. Either who we were, that's our challah on Shabbos, and who we weren't, that is our matzah on Pesach. And the unique role that we have played, and that the Jewish resilience has been incredible. Right? We say often the greatest miracle, I think Rav Yaakov Emden said, people say, if only we could have experienced the miracles of Egypt. He said the greatest miracle that we could experience that outshines the miracles of Egypt is that we are all gathered here today, Thursday afternoon, learning Torah together. And throughout the world, Jews are gathering together, learning Torah, self-identifying as Jews, proudly living as Jews, teaching as Jews. That is the greatest, greatest miracle. Zman Cheruseinu, the time of our freedom, as we are busy with all of the externals of Pesach, let us be at least equally focused on the internals of Pesach and on the Zman Cheruteinu, on our freedom. Thank God we don't have to struggle for the freedom that they had to do in Russia. In certain ways, when you're fighting for that, you identify stronger, right? Or many do. But when it's so easy, it becomes a little bit more difficult to have that drive, to have that push. But Zman Cheruseinu, it's a time of our cher, it's a time of our freedom, and it's talking about an inner freedom that we can feel and we can build upon in order to fully express and live who we are as Jews of Yetziat Mitzrayim and Jews of 2018.
Amen.
Okay, we'll call it here. And once again, Doran, thank you. And that was the Eloi Nishmas, Mordechai ben Yaakov.
Could I come in? Rabbi,
Yes.
if swelling